The reason why I wanted to talk to you is I am conducting an ongoing investigation for quite some time now on a subject by the name of Jeffrey Epstein.
A friend of mine told me about Jeffrey. She said she was helping him find girls. I hope you do something about it.
From chilling police interviews to heartbreaking testimony to significant correspondence, we're breaking down some of the major revelations from the recent materials release in the Jeffrey Epstein case. We're going to go back almost 20 years ago to understand how this whole investigation and legal saga started. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Jeffrey Epstein. He may have died almost 5 years ago now, but he is still very much in our national discourse, and especially now. Why? Because something very big just happened. A trove of materials have been released regarding when the deceased financier was first investigated by the Palm Beach Police Department back in 2005, and when evidence was presented to a grand jury in 2006. And I will tell you, it is something. It definitely sheds a light not only on these incredibly disturbing allegations, but also why this case proceeded the way that it did. And what I mean by that is I have to give you the backstory on how this played out. So back in 2005, the stepmom of a 14-year-old girl came forward to Palm Beach police saying this teenager may have been abused by an older wealthy man. So the police, they begin looking into this, they conduct interviews, and they come to find out that Jeffrey Epstein had allegedly set up a system to recruit girls to provide him massages and sometimes to engage in sexual activity. And it seems the girls would not only be paid for services that they provided, but also paid to bring more girls to Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, at one point, he allegedly told one victim, "The younger, the better." So the case was brought to the state attorney's office, the prosecutors. A grand jury was impaneled where the jurors heard all sorts of evidence and testimony from detectives and two of the alleged victims. And that grand jury ended up indicting Jeffrey Epstein in 2006 on felony solicitation of prostitution. And that's it. Yes. Now, there have been a lot of arguments about this. Why didn't prosecutors pursue more aggressive charges? Why was this the only one? For example, could you have brought him up on rape or sexual assault of some kind, right? Well, apparently, Palm Beach Police Department chief and the lead detective were particularly troubled by this prosecution. So what do? They refer the matter to the FBI, and they bring it to the assistant U.S. attorney. So now we're talking about the feds. And in the end, in 2008, Jeffrey Epstein and prosecutors worked out a deal where he pled guilty to state charges of solicitation of prostitution and procurement of minors. He's sentenced to 18 months in prison, but only serves 13, and by the way, spends most of the time in a work release program where he can leave the jail to work at his office and then go back to jail at night. Yes, he had to register as a sex offender too, but the big thing here, he was able to avoid more serious state charges or even federal charges. And that is why this is called the sweetheart deal, this whole sweetheart deal that's been talked about in the media. Now, the controversy surrounding this deal led to Alex Acosta to resign in 2019 as the then acting labor secretary because he was the U.S. attorney back in 2008 when this deal happened. And the Department of Justice even concluded that Acosta used poor judgment in signing off on this deal. Then what do we know happened? 2019, Jeffrey Epstein, he's arrested again, this time on New York federal sex trafficking charges, winds up dead in his jail cell before going to trial, authorities concluding he took his own life. As for his accomplice, his girlfriend, his madam, Ghislaine Maxwell, who helped Epstein procure young girls to assault, she was found guilty of sex trafficking-related crimes and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Now, the Palm Beach Post has been fighting for the release of these grand jury materials and the investigation for years, and they weren't making significant headway. And look, from a legal point of view, that makes sense because as a matter of law, grand jury proceedings, they're generally always kept secret. They're closed to the public. However, the Florida legislature, they passed a bill that was signed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and this authorized the release of these grand jury materials. Governor DeSantis said at the time, quote, "The public deserves to know who participated in Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking. Nobody should be protected from facing justice due to their wealth or status, and those who harm children should be exposed and punished to the fullest extent of the law." So what just happened? Judge Luis Delgado released these materials, the investigative materials, the grand jury materials, calls Epstein, quote, "the most infamous pedophile in American history. The details in the record will be outrageous to decent people. The testimony taken by the grand jury concerns activity ranging from grossly unacceptable to rape. All of the conduct at issue is sexually deviant, disgusting, and criminal." And honestly, it truly is, which again makes it very confusing why Epstein was prosecuted the way that he was and why he was offered this kind of deal when you could make the argument, the evidence suggests, he could have been brought up on more serious charges back in the day. Hey everybody, this episode of Sidebar is sponsored by Truthfinder, and it makes sense since we cover a lot of stories where we ask, how well do we really know the people in our lives? It's a scary thing to think about. Well, Truthfinder is a service that can maybe provide you some answers because it is one of the largest public records search services in the United States. You go on their website, truthfinder.com, and you type in a name. And within minutes and a paid subscription purchase, you can access unlimited reports that could include information like phone numbers, location history, criminal and traffic records, including possible arrests, criminal convictions. Also, if you type in an address within the report, it shows you registered sex offenders that may live in that area too, which honestly is just kind of wild to see. Whether it's researching new dates or friends or reconnecting with people, Truthfinder is a great tool. And right now, you can get 50% off of your first month of confidential background reports at truthfinder.com/LC sidebar. But let's talk about what happened in this release. Let's talk about what was released. So first up, interviews. Now, as I mentioned, law enforcement started conducting interviews with alleged victims, those who say that they were minors or young women when they were subjected to Jeffrey Epstein.
She told me about this guy I was short on rent 1 month, and she told me that all I had to do was give him a massage and he would give me $200. And that's pretty much it. And I thought about it. I was like, I really need the money. I've asked my parents, they can't give me the money. I asked everyone I knew, and I went there with her. I gave him a massage, and it was a weird situation.
Okay, have you have any formal massage training?
No.
Did you provide the massage with clothing on?
All I had was underwear on. She did not tell me that. I was absolutely surprised when I got there. I knew nothing.
Okay. Did she tell you that you would have to provide the massage with just underwear?
No.
And look, we won't go into more details about what happened here, but here's the thing. As you will see, these accounts of multiple people are consistent.
A friend of mine told me about Jeffrey. She said she was helping him find girls. We're not friends anymore though, so you can't mention my name to her.
Okay.
And she told me basically that you just go and you give him a massage for about an hour and for $200. And obviously that sounds a little too good to be true, and as I found out, it wasn't quite what she said. He has the girls take off their clothes and give them a massage, and
How old were you when you first started going to this? Obviously you were.
Right. I'm not sure if it was before or after my 17th birthday. So I was either 16 about to be 17 or...
And unfortunately, there's more. The stories match up. They're consistent. The same purported method. Again, this idea of not only recruiting these girls and women, but also having them doing the recruiting.
The reason why I wanted to talk to you is I am conducting an ongoing investigation for quite some time now on a subject by the name of Jeffrey Epstein.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And through my investigation, I do know that you have some knowledge and you've been at the house, and that's what I want to talk to you about.
Okay.
And again, I'm saying you're not in any trouble. Okay? You're not a suspect. You're a witness, possibly a victim, but I do want to talk to you. Okay? All right. Before we start, can you raise your right hand for me?
Yeah.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay. How did you meet Mr. Epstein?
Through a friend.
Through a friend.
Mhm.
What school were you going to when you?
I wasn't in school when I met him. I had already graduated.
You already graduated?
Yes.
Okay. How old are you now?
19.
19. How long ago did you meet him?
About a year, I'd say, maybe a little over a year. Right around a year.
Okay. Again, I've talked to a lot of girls, 30, almost 40 girls so far, and so I know pretty much when he takes you to the house what transpires. Okay. I know it might be a little embarrassing or whatever, but don't be. Like I said, I've talked to many people already, and are pretty much familiar as to what happened in the house. Okay. Walk me through this when you went to his house for the first time.
Okay. She took me over to the house. She waited downstairs. I just went up, gave him a massage, and that was it. I mean. Okay.
She approached you to
yeah,
work?
She's like, oh, do you need to make any extra money? I'm like, yeah. She's like, okay, I can give you, like $200. It's this older guy in Palm Beach. He gets a lot of massages from girls. That was really. That's all she told me. That's what I mean.
Okay. Are you a licensed therapist or masseuse therapist?
No, I'm not licensed, no. And, I would always tell them, what the situation was. Because, I wasn't told the whole, at first I was not told the whole situation.
What did he tell you would have to do?
He told me I would just take my shirt off and give him a massage, and that would be it.
Topless or with the bra?
Topless.
Okay.
So, that was it.
Okay. Was there ever a time that you ever told him, hey, I'm not comfortable with that?
The first time he asked me if I would take my jeans off, and I told him I wasn't comfortable with that.
So as we listen to this, you can again see where the criticism came from regarding the deal that Epstein got. Again, the argument would be, given what law enforcement was finding out, why wasn't Epstein more aggressively prosecuted, either on a state or federal level? Now, aside from the law, and we can talk a lot about that, we have to remember the human element of this. Because think about how tough this is for them to recount these experiences.
And did anything else happen?
I'm sorry, I don't like thinking back on this, so.
Okay, first of all, I know this is hard on you, okay? I know that you put this behind you.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I've talked to have, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You're not the only person that he's done this to.
Okay.
And by the way, listen to how these encounters would end, at least told by one of these witnesses.
He just got up and walked out. He's like, okay, you can put your clothes on, and he closed the door. Yes.
And you were paid how much?
$200. He asked me for my phone number just in case he wanted to call me and come back, and they called me, and I never called them back. They called me with a bunch of different phone numbers, and I picked up one time, and after that, I never picked up again because I didn't know who the numbers were, and they left me several messages, and I never called them back.
Very eerily similar accounts that we have heard about Jeffrey Epstein, and we heard more about this during the Ghislaine Maxwell trial about recruitment and contact and staying in touch with these victims. And investigators discovered that Epstein and his assistants and Ghislaine Maxwell, they would coordinate massage times with these girls, often multiple massages a day. And then those girls would be asked to recruit friends, especially if they attended local high schools. One victim told police that she always gave other girls a heads up about what would be happening inside the mansion because she says the acquaintance who brought her for the first time wasn't completely truthful about Epstein's expectations. Now, there was a lot more in this evidence release. One of the things that we saw was how police served a search warrant on Epstein's Palm Beach property.
Police officers in Palm Beach County, Florida, being the premises occupied or under the control of Jeffrey Epstein, white male, date of birth 1/20/53, and there is now being kept in the above described premises certain computers, including electromagnetic, optical, electrochemical, or other high-speed data processing device performing logical, arithmetic, or storage functions, any notes, ledger, personal phone books, Rolodex,
books, and any form of recording data of records in payments, telephone numbers, and names of girls that have frequented the house. The laws prohibiting sexual activities with certain minors, a second-degree felony. Lewd lascivious molestation, the second-degree felony. This is your copy. When we are concluded, I will leave a list of what items were taken. Okay? I would ask that you don't answer your telephone. I know that the gentleman had was having a conversation with Mr. Epstein at the time. So I'm sure he's trying to call to find out what's going on. You will be told what was going on as soon as we're done.
And what do we see in these walkthrough videos of the search of the property? Aside from just how creepy it is to see the inner workings of Epstein's residence, there were odd things like a framed picture of Ghislaine Maxwell and pictures and photos of naked women, which, by the way, was corroborated by the account of an alleged victim.
The whole situation was odd. When we first pulled up, before we even got out of the car, she said, "Don't say anything, don't speak unless you're spoken to." So I was like, you know, what the hell are you getting me into? You know what I mean? So I didn't say anything, and there was pictures, there were pencil drawings of naked people. I don't know, that's all that looked really weird.
And by the way, going back to something, did you hear how that investigator in the search warrant video said to not tip off Epstein about what was going on? Well, we heard something very similar in one of these interviews.
Because he is aware of the investigation. I did a search warrant in the house.
Right.
Were you aware that he had cameras in the house?
Yes. Wasn't sure where. I knew he had some on the outside of the house. I wasn't sure where the other cameras were.
Okay. But he is aware of the investigation. That's what I'm saying. Don't be surprised if someone from his, like a defense attorney or a private investigator tries to talk to you.
Okay.
Okay, now moving on, in this materials release, there was also a number of voicemails and audio recordings, but they are incredibly difficult to understand. The quality is so bad, it's hard to make out what is being said. But I'll tell you what we did get a clear look at, and was one of the central aspects of this release, and what the Palm Beach Post seemingly really wanted to have exposed: the transcript of the grand jury proceedings. These were the jurors who ultimately indicted Jeffrey Epstein, but remember, only on that solicitation charge. But let's see how that questioning of these witnesses who said they were subjected to Jeffrey Epstein, let's see how that questioning played out. I'll give you an example. And this is going to be between the prosecutor and the witness. So part of the transcript reads, quote, "Question, how were you met when you first went to his house? Answer, I was wearing a regular t-shirt, my Hollister shirt, and just some jeans. Okay. What kind of underwear did you have on? A thong. And the bra? What type of bra? It was a bra. Okay. Nothing special? Uh-huh. Were you comfortable getting down to your bra and underwear? Like it, I was kind of hesitant. I was like sitting in the room until Jeffrey came in, like thinking like to myself, well, like what's going on? Like, I don't know. I was kind of hesitant, but then I just didn't care because I wanted $200 because I wanted to spend it. So I just didn't care." Or how about this particularly creepy exchange with a witness who says she was 17 years old when she had this incident with Jeffrey Epstein. Quote, "When you were massaging him, did he say anything to you, make any comments? Polite conversation. Okay, what kind of things was he asking you? Just about school and what I was going to do when I got older. He knew you were in school? Yes." Not to mention that she testified when she turned 18. She claims Epstein gave her bras and panties. She also testified how he had intercourse with her before she turned 18. And by the way, Jeffrey Epstein was in his 50s when this was going on. Now, to give you an idea of how difficult and how complicated this whole event in their lives was, listen to this exchange in front of the grand jury. Question, you appear uncomfortable testifying today, yes? Yes. This morning when we first met when you got here, what did you ask me? If there was any possible way I could not testify. Were you told you wouldn't have to testify? That was my understanding. I expressed that I did not want to, and I was told that I would be contacted later on with more information on that and other subjects. Were you ever contacted? No. Till you got the subpoena from me? Yes. Okay. Do you want Mr. Epstein to be charged with any crimes in relation to what went on between he and you? Honestly, I don't really know. But going back to the testimony of this 16-year-old girl who says she was 14 when Jeffrey Epstein sexually abused her. Again, we believe he was in his 50s at the time. She testified, again, when she was 14, how another teen asked her if she wanted to make $200. So she said all she would have to do is give Jeffrey Epstein a massage. She said she spoke with a female assistant of Jeffrey Epstein's who asked her how old she was. This girl's acquaintance had told her that she should lie and say she was 18, so she did because she said she wanted to make money. And the acquaintance picked her up, took her to Jeffrey Epstein's home in Palm Beach, where a security guard met them both, let them through. The teen testified that an assistant took her upstairs to her room with a massage table and told her to get undressed down to her bra and underwear before Epstein came in a towel. Now, I'm not going to go into further detail of this encounter, but Epstein had apparently offered $300 for something else. Now, there has been criticism for this line of questioning that I'm about to get into because it seems the prosecutor is trying to undermine the testimony of this girl. The transcript reads, quote, question, so you didn't want to admit that you had allowed him to touch you? Answer, yeah. Okay, and he gave you $300? Uh-huh. You left your number so he could contact you again? Yes. It goes on. Question, do you drink beer? At parties. It says you have 4 piercings. Not anymore. Now I used to have my belly button pierced. You have to be 18 in the state of Florida to have body piercings other than your ears. How? My dad. How did you get those? My dad took me to get my belly button pierced for my 14th birthday because like everybody was getting one, so I begged for it. And then I just got my nose pierced. Did you have to provide identification for your nose just to prove you were 18? No, my dad let me. Your dad, okay. So you didn't have false identification at the time? No, okay. So you said yes to drinking and smoking pot? Yeah. Or how about this exchange? You're aware that you committed a crime. Now I am. I didn't know it was a crime when I was doing it. Like, I don't know, I guess it was prostitution or something like that. So on one hand, you could say this is very problematic. It's very troubling, right? You could say maybe the prosecutor is placing the impetus on her. And yes, we're talking about a child. Are we blaming her? Now, there is another argument to this. The other argument is, as a prosecutor, especially presenting evidence to a grand jury where the defense is not present, they may have a duty to submit exonerating evidence to a jury, evidence to show Jeffrey Epstein did not do this. Perhaps it's necessary to point out inconsistencies or issues in her testimony. And we spoke with the current Palm Beach County State Attorney, Dave Arenberg, who had another perspective on this.
My take on the question of why would a prosecutor try to intentionally tank their case is that I don't think they were trying to intentionally tank the case. I think what happened is that they were living in a different time. They were living in a time when if you were an underage girl who engaged in sex acts for money, you were seen under the law as a lawbreaker, as a criminal, as a prostitute. Nowadays, thankfully, the law has changed. We have a different attitude towards it to understand that these young women, these girls, were victims, as they are. They were victims of exploitation, of sexual assault, but it was a different time back then. They had different laws in the books, and I think the questions reflected the laws at the time and the sentiment at the time. You saw it wasn't just the prosecutor who made a question that we now find offensive. It was 2 of the grand jurors, apparently.
Well, from there, prosecutors then turned to the jury, because here the jury was able to pose questions to the witnesses. Yes, in a grand jury proceeding, the jurors can submit questions to the witnesses. And here, it seems they were permitted to directly question these witnesses. And again, the questions posed to these purported victims are, yes, a bit questionable. One juror asked, quote, do you have any idea deep down inside of you that what you're doing is wrong? Yeah, I did. Oh, do you? And how about this one? And you're well aware that what you're doing to your own reputation? Yes, I do. Another juror asked, did it ever occur to you that he could have hacked you up? The answer, yes, I thought about it a lot. And the juror's response, you should give it a little further thought. Now, we did hear the opposite. One young woman testified about how Epstein had sexual relations with her as a teenager, and a juror asked her, "Do you think he took advantage of your youth?" "Maybe, but it was also stupid of me to put myself in that situation." The juror responded, "Perhaps you were too young to be up against a man of that age who had more control over you and that you know." Now, the prosecutor also called in Palm Beach Police Detective Joe Ricari for questioning, and he talked about an interview he did with a woman who said she was 17 when she met Epstein and that she started bringing girls over to his home. So according to the transcript, Detective Ricari said, quote, "She agreed to bring the girls to him, and he told her the younger, the better. She brought a 23-year-old to massage him, and he told her that she was too old and he wanted someone younger. Knowing that she went to a local school, he recommended that she ask her friends. During the statement, she gave me approximately 6 names that she can remember that she took to the house that all went to the school." Pretty frightening stuff to think about. Now, moving forward, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of materials in this release. There are police reports, there are internet searches, there is correspondence, there are phone logs. I will tell you what is really interesting is the communication surrounding the deal between Epstein and the government. For instance, this is an email from September 20th, 2007, and it's from an assistant U.S. attorney to Barry Krischer. Now, Barry Krischer was the then acting Palm Beach County state attorney. And the email reads as, quote, "Hi, Barry. I just left a voicemail for Claudette, but figured I would send this to you too. Our plea negotiations are not going very well, and I have given the defense a deadline of tomorrow afternoon to provide me with a signed agreement. If we cannot reach such an agreement, then I need to indict the case on Tuesday, and I will not budge from that date. During my last phone call with defense counsel, he told me that they have changed their minds again, and they only want to plead to state charges, not concurrent state and federal. I said, this is fine, but we will need a signed non-prosecution agreement between the defense and us by tomorrow afternoon, and an agreement at least verbally worked out with your office by Monday. I just think that Mr. Epstein is having second thoughts about spending time in jail and paying damages to the girls. I know you're out tomorrow, but if something comes up, I will call Claudette and email you. Thanks." So it's messages like that where you're getting another inside look about what was happening behind the scenes. But there is something else that has been getting a lot of attention within the hundreds of pages of documents. There are photocopies of Jeffrey Epstein's message books. Now remember, this is the early 2000s, so people, yes, they had cell phones, but if someone had called the landline at the Epstein mansion in Palm Beach, an employee would likely take down a message. Now, some of the messages are, of course, pretty innocuous. For example, there's a message taken down in April of 2004, seemingly from Epstein's brother, Mark, that simply says, "Call me in New York." Longtime friend, fellow millionaire Les Wexner, the owner of Victoria's Secret, also seems to often appear in the message book. This note just says, "Call me." Wexner, by the way, has been called out in recent years for his connection to Epstein, who he gave control of basically all of his assets at one point in time. Now, Wexner has said that he knew nothing of Epstein's indiscretions or alleged indiscretions and says that he himself was taken advantage of. Famed attorney Alan Dershowitz, who helped secure Epstein's so-called sweetheart deal, also appears to have left a message that just says, "New info." Other famous names seem to pop up as well, like magician David Copperfield. And by the way, victims who have filed lawsuits against Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell have named David Copperfield as being present at get-togethers at Jeffrey Epstein's homes. He also allegedly asked one of the alleged victims if she knew about getting money for bringing Epstein new girls. Questionable alleged comment. But he also allegedly performed magic for Epstein's guests, because in another message, the note-taker wrote, "Magic David called." Others with more direct connections to Jeffrey Epstein's supposed worldwide sex trafficking network also show up multiple times in Epstein's call logs. For instance, French model scout Jean-Luc Brunel has been accused of acting as a pimp for Epstein, procuring young girls for him to sexually assault. In this phone message, Brunel appears to say, "I need a big favor. I hope you will do it." Brunel, by the way, was kicked out of a modeling agency back in the 90s. This was following a report of decades-long abuse against young women and girls. But Epstein and Brunel started a new agency, And when Epstein died in 2019, French authorities opened an inquiry into Brunel. He tried to flee to Senegal but was arrested at the airport, and Brunel was found dead at a prison in Paris on February 19th, 2022, as he was being investigated for rape and trafficking of minors. Now, knowing that, Brunel's other messages seem to be a lot more sinister. For example, this note reads, "He just did a good one. 18 years. She spoke to me and said, 'I love Jeffrey.'" Investigators also believe that Epstein and Brunel may have spoken sometimes in code. This message reads, quote, "He is a teacher for you to teach you Russian. She is 2 times 8 years old." That's 16. "Not blonde. Lessons are free, and you can have first today. If yes, call." Pretty disturbing if we think that is what it seems to be. Now, alleged victims or recruiters would also leave messages. This one from someone named Tatum reads, "Has girl for tonight." And this one is specifically addressed to Ghislaine Maxwell, or Sarah, believed to be one of Epstein's assistants, and it's from Emmy. Quote, "She doesn't know at what time she must come this night for the massage." Now, in this materials release, there are also more investigative reports that detail what happened when girls weren't showing Epstein the appreciation that he seemingly expected. This document reads, quote, "She stated on the last time she went to provide a massage, she was notified by Sarah to come to the house and work. She stated she was now dating her current boyfriend and did not feel comfortable going. She recalled it was approximately January 2005. She said she went, already thinking that this would be the last time. She went upstairs and went into the master bedroom. She met with Epstein, who was wearing only a towel as he entered the room to lie on the table. She stated Epstein caught her looking at the clock on several occasions. Epstein asked her if she was in a hurry. She stated her boyfriend was in the car waiting for her. She further stated that Epstein got upset and she wasn't enjoying the massage. She told him that she didn't want to continue and would not be back. Epstein told her to leave as she was ruining his massage. I asked her if she had any contact with Epstein's organization. She stated she received $200 from the Western Union as a Christmas gift. She advised she had no formal training in providing any massages. She also stated she was 16 years old when she first went to Epstein's house. So despite what seems like pretty solid evidence of sexual assault of minors and more, the grand jury, as I mentioned, indicted Epstein on solicitation. And as I mentioned, that didn't sit well with some of the detectives on the case. There's a difference here between law enforcement and prosecutors. In fact, the chief of police at the time, Michael Reeder, sent a letter to a victim's father in 2005, and let's read it. "Your daughter was the victim of a crime which has been investigated by the Palm Beach Police Department and subsequently referred for prosecution to the Palm Beach State Attorney's Office. You may be aware that Jeffrey Epstein was indicted on charges of solicitation of prostitution by a state of Florida grand jury last week and turned himself in at the Palm Beach County Jail on July 23, 2006. While I do not speak for them, it is my understanding that is the full context in which the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office intends to address the charges that involve the crime in which your daughter was victim." The chief later says in the letter, "I do not feel that justice has been sufficiently served by the indictment that has been issued. Therefore, please know that this matter has been referred to the Federal Bureau of Investigation to determine if violations of federal law have occurred." And we know how that played out. So with this materials release, we definitely have a lens now into the inner workings of this investigation and Epstein and how this case all started. And I am confident that this is not the last time we discuss more about Jeffrey Epstein, as there is still an effort to peel back more layers of this story to get the truth of what really happened. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.